Module 4 is going to focus exclusively on teaching techniques for before, during, and after reading. Some of the content of this professor overview is going to be repetitive from the last one, so it's just for review. And then we're going to take you through a couple demonstrations of before, during, and after teaching techniques as we talk about the purposes of each again. I am showing this in a different view so that I can actually work on the slides when we get to some of the interactive activities. Now that you've explored your textbooks and examined the various teaching techniques that can be used in contemporary classrooms before, during, and after reading, you're going to spend some time in this module participating as a student. That's the best way to learn whether you like them or not, whether they work or not for you as a reader. These techniques are designed to help students improve their reading comprehension by developing core reading strategies like predicting, questioning, inferring, connecting, summarizing, and visualizing, and allowing them to practice those strategies on a regular basis. You may recognize this from before. Just a reminder, techniques are not strategies. And you may have noticed that many authors, and probably many of the faculty members and teaching colleagues with whom you work, don't differentiate between techniques as what the teacher does and strategies as the mental plan or tool we want students to develop as a result of the lessons and techniques we choose. For example, Stevens and Brown, that's your text, and you read from Stephanie Harvey, they refer to strategies, but they're really talking about techniques in many cases when they are referring to what the teacher does in the classroom. And you're probably asking, why does it matter so much that it's been brought up in 2 professor overviews now? And that's because you as a teacher can't use these activities just for the sake of the activity, and that happens so often in teaching. Their purpose is to help students develop strategies that they'll carry with them for life. Nobody we know creates a KWL chart when they read, as I said in the last overview, but most of them predict, question, and summarize. The activity or the technique is not the goal. It is the means to the goal. If you lose sight of that, your students may never learn the reason behind the activities you have them do, and they won't develop the strategies they need. Remember that slide from Module 1 overview. It's extremely important that we differentiate between techniques and strategies. If students learn anything, they learn that they don't have to read course material because there are alternative routes to acquiring the information. The end result is passive reading or no reading at all. I'd have to ask you if you know any students like this. Maybe you've even been one yourself. And I'm sure you're thinking, well, what's the alternative route? And we know what that alternative route is. It's you, the teacher. When you answer the questions, when you give them the notes, when they don't pass a test and they say, why didn't you teach me this? Why didn't you tell me what would be on the test? When students learn that they don't have to read the book because the teacher's going to answer all the questions and give them all the information they need to know, that's when we have passive readers. Again, remember the all-important definition of instructional framework. What a teacher does to structure instruction around before, during, and after reading is critical to active and purposeful reading. So before reading, dependent readers are dependent in part because of their passive reading. We need to get them thinking about the selection and about how they will read the selection before they begin the text. And you saw this in the last overview, this slide, so I won't go over it again, but these are some reasons that we engage in before reading instruction. Many students approach text with feelings of inadequacy, fear, and even dread. How can we as teachers help reduce the lack of control and uncertainty that many students bring? We can generate interest, we can get them curious, we can help them understand that they do really know more about the subject than they think they do, help them make connections, and help them be aware of strategies they're going to need. And these are just some very relevant quotes. Schools do not pay enough attention to students' curiosity and imagination. As a result, students disengage from active participation in the academic life of the classroom because there's little satisfaction to be gained from it. Without that satisfaction from schoolwork, there is little reason or motivation to continue the pursuit of learning. Cognitive activity cannot be divorced from emotional involvement. Schema and motivation are intertwined with students' reasons for reading. Meaningful learning with text occurs when students reap satisfaction from text and a sense of accomplishment. Before reading focuses on what do I need to know, activating prior knowledge, making predictions, setting a purpose for reading. How well do I already know it, using prior knowledge, confirming or refuting predictions, setting up a plan for reading, and connecting what one knows to the materials to be learned. So connecting the known to the new. It sets up conceptual conflicts, puzzles, doubts, surprises, perplexities. These are the things that motivate us to continue forward. One of the things you engaged in early on in this course was a word sort. And let me just say right now that I know that word sort had lots of words. You would never want to do that to your students, but you as adult learners, and because that was so concept heavy, we felt pretty confident giving you that many words. But in your K-12 classroom, you want to limit the words in a word sort so that it's not overwhelming. This is a word sort that we can do as a pre-reading activity to a piece of text we're going to be looking at. And I got just a assortment of words here. Obviously, it's going to be very one-sided word sort because you can't participate with me. But I'm just going to look at the words. I don't know what that word is, so I'm going to put it over here in an I don't know column. When you do word sorts with children, it's nice to have an I don't know column, but you may want to limit them to how many they can put in there because often it's a scapegoat. They'll just put stuff in there because it's easier. I know butterflies and moths are insects, so I'm going to put those three words together. I know monarch is a type of butterfly and moth, so I'm going to put that over there as well. And I don't know if a silkworm is a type of, I know it's an insect, so I'm going to put that over there. Smell and sight are senses. Night and sun have to do with one another. Light has to do with night and sun. Wings and antenna are parts of butterflies and moths. And I know they're colorful, so I'm going to put that with parts. So here's my sort. And I can justify my categories. My categories are, these are types of insects. These are senses, 2 of the 5 senses. This is, I don't know what you would call this, but it has to do with night and day. And these are parts of a butterfly and moth, and that's an I don't know. Just having the students engage in this automatically gets them thinking, making connections, digging into their prior knowledge, thinking about the words, working. If they can work together, often they'll be able to do some word study and word analysis and figure out words, asking questions, making predictions. It's a wonderful activity to do. It's really a great activity to do before, during, and after, because you can take the word sort, and while they're reading, they might be resorting the words because they're making new connections, and then they can resort at the end and see how their sort's going to be different from their sort in the beginning. So this is a particular teaching technique that you can take them through the whole process. But what you want to emphasize with this is that the reason they're doing it before reading is to activate prior knowledge, make connections, make predictions, ask questions, and get ready to read. So that's a word sort. I also want to talk about the KWL because it's another technique that can go all the way through before, during, and after. KWL is pretty familiar to everyone. It's 3 columns. What do we already know? What do we want to know? And again, if you ask children that question, they often will say nothing. So you want to kind of expand that to what might we ask, or what could we know, and then the L is for learned. These 2 columns are good for before reading. So what do I already know? Well, I know a little bit about, I know what a butterfly and a moth are. They have wings, because that's butterflies and moths. Butterflies and moths have wings. I know moths fly at night. I know they have bodies. And I know butterflies are really colorful. And I actually have some moths, I think they're moths, in a glass frame that I think can be colorful too. I'm not really sure about that. And I could go on, and you would want to. And again, you can see that as a pre-reading activity, this is getting us to ask questions, because right here I'm thinking, well, I don't know. Make connections, because I'm thinking about butterflies and moths that I've seen, and make predictions. What do I want to know? I want to know if moths are colorful or not. What else would I like to know? I'd like to know, do butterflies fly at night? Oops. Do butterflies fly at night? Etc. And I'm not going to do the learned column because I don't need to do that. I'm going to copy this slide. I'm going to copy this chart because we're going to need it later. Okay. So that was it before reading. This is during reading. And here's a couple really good quotes to go with during reading. What do you mean active? You sit, you stare, you turn pages. What's active about that? And that's a quote from a student that Kylene Beers interviewed, a struggling student who truly didn't understand what reading was all about. It's more critical for dependent readers to talk about text during the reading experience than after it. And if you look at most classrooms, if anything's going on, it's afterwards. Very little going on during reading, and as she noticed in her research, it's really important for readers to talk about text while reading. This was also in the last slides set, so I won't focus on this one either, but again, it's why we do during reading. We want to create motivation, we want to identify what's important, we want to look at what skills we need, and we want to identify those three texts, those three connections, text to text, text to self, and text to world. And here's some active process of engagement: to make meaning, to check understanding, to monitor comprehension, to stop and summarize, which again we know students don't want to ever stop, they want to get through to the end, to make connections, to ask questions, to use fix-up strategies, to generate and evaluate predictions and inferences, and the teacher chunks text by assigning portions to be read. This piece right here is for you. This is a teaching technique for you to think about. To help students understand that they need to stop, you need to demonstrate how to identify a chunk of reading. And sometimes it's not a whole paragraph. Sometimes it's part of a paragraph. All right, a during reading activity that is not that interactive at first and then moves into being highly interactive is close reading. And if you do a YouTube search on close reading demonstrations, you will find quite a few classroom demonstrations of close reading. Basically, close reading makes visible the internal process that our brains go through that's pretty invisible to readers who don't know that we do that, by talking about how you're reading through the text. So I'm going to model a little bit of this as best I can on PowerPoint. It's not going to be very good, but so I'm going to read the first sentence. Butterflies and moths are insects belonging to a group called Lepidoptera, which means scale wings. There's a lot in that sentence that can be confusing. So we know we're talking about butterflies and moths. We've got two things here, and the and tells me they're either going to be similar or different or a little of both. We know that they're both insects. So insects is a word for butterflies and moths because it says they are insects. And then it says they belong to a group called Lepidoptera. So that tells me that Lepidoptera means belongs to insects, and I'm going to draw a line here that I know now that butterflies, if that were a good arrow, that would work, that butterflies and moths are insects. Insects are in Lepidoptera. So butterflies and moths are Lepidoptera. Lepidoptera are in a group, in this larger group called insects. And then it says, comma, which means scale wings. Well, what does that mean? What's the which means scale wings? So I know enough about language and grammar to know that this is referring back to Lepidoptera. So this means Lepidoptera. So scale wings means Lepidoptera. So I could infer. Now insects, it doesn't mean Lepidoptera. So those two I would keep the same color. And you can use circles, you can use arrows, you can jot notes in the margin, which I can't do in here, but I would if I were demonstrating this. What we really want kids to see is that reading in this way is messy. You can write all over the text, you interact with the text. You don't read the text and expect it to jump off the page and make meaning in your head by itself. Their bodies and wings are covered with many flat scales that provide color. Okay, right away, a struggling reader is not going to connect the word there to butterflies and moths. So if I were drawing right now, I would highlight butterflies and moths, and I would draw circles around these. I'd highlight there, draw circles around these, and an arrow to butterflies and moths. Butterflies and moths' bodies and wings are covered with many flat scales that provide color. Well, this tells me that they both have color because this is about both of them. And that's an answer to one of my questions earlier. They have 3 body parts, 6 legs, 2 eyes, and antenna. And I would, if I could right now, I'd be drawing a little diagram to help me picture that. Butterflies and moths both. Here is a key word, both. Both need warmth to fly. So these are one of those signal words that tells us that this is a similarity. So they both need to be warm. Butterflies get their warmth by spreading their wings in the sun. Moths, which fly only at night, shake their wings to warm them. Again, as a reader who understands grammar, I know that this word has set this up so that we're going to be looking at a comparison and contrast piece of text here. And right away I would make a chart or a Venn diagram and start putting notes in there as to what's what. So right now I know they both need to be warm, but butterflies get warm by spreading their wings, whereas moths get warm by shaking their wings. And again, we're demonstrating that. So I won't go on any further, but as you can see, as you go sentence by sentence, you can really pick apart the text. Now, needless to say, you do not want to do this with every single text, every single lesson that kids are reading, or they're never going to want to read again. The point is you want to show children that sometimes it's important to stop and take the text apart and understand what's going on. And the other point is you're modeling what's going on in your mind while you're reading the text. I was focusing a lot on the parts of text, but another thing I could have modeled was I could be asking questions. So I might say, butterflies get their warmth by spreading their wing in the sun. I'm making a connection. I remember seeing butterflies all over our plants, and their wings were open, so they must have been getting sun. And moths, which fly only at night, shake their wings to warm them. I don't think I've ever seen a moth shaking its wings. I wonder how they do that and what it looks like. So you can model question asking and connection making as well. So that's close reading. While we're reading, we also can continue. Let me delete this and put our chart in. We can continue to use our KWL chart. We can start putting information in here of things we learned. So I learned that the scales on wings give both color. If we had kept reading, we would have learned that moths don't have as much color as butterflies. And maybe I would come up with more questions. I want to know right now, how do moths shake their wings? So I can use my KWL chart in that way as I'm reading. And then there's after reading. Extending meaning, just closing the book, doesn't close off the thinking that shapes our understanding of text. So finishing the book doesn't mean the experience is over. This is also from the last slideshow. We want to clarify meaning, we want to elaborate and use the meaning, we want to organize what we've learned in our heads, share ideas. After reading continues the active process of engagement with the text, to question the text, the author, and one another, and this also to evaluate the text, the author, to figure out how to fix up comprehension problems, to clarify meaning, to reflect on connections and share meaning with others, to talk about what we've just read, to visualize and put things in context. An after reading activity that is another interesting one to use is called a word chain. In a word chain, you make connections in a linear fashion between words. Now that I've read the text, and I have it here to go back to if we need to, let me pop our little KWL. So I have the text here to go back to. Now that we've read the text, we can take these words, and I can probably, it also aids in retelling. So obviously you're not going to have all the words you need in here, but I know that butterflies are insects, so I could link those. And if you want to make this manipulative, you put these words on paper links, and the students can make chains, and then they use them to retell or summarize. So butterflies are insects belonging to a group of insects called Lepidoptera. And if I'm like most of my students, I'd want to get a blank little strip of paper and write moths on there and stick that in my chain, because they're excited about what they learn and they want to tell you. So don't confine them to using, oh, there it is, I thought I had it. So butterflies and moths, put that in there, are insects belonging to a group called Lepidoptera. And I put my little chain together and link my words. And then I can keep on going, and obviously the kids are going to have to go back. They can either make one long chain, or they might want to make a smaller chain, because I'm seeing I've got the word wings here, and remember we talked about wings, and we talked about night and sun and light, and we didn't read anything about sight and smell at that time, or the monarch or the silkworm. So I could also say that butterflies use sun to use their wings in the sun to get warm, and moths shake their wings at night to get warm, and I could make a chain like that. So word chains are just a level up from a word sort, in that you are using your knowledge to make more extended connections, and as I said, a good model for retelling. And then back to our good old KWL chart. It's pretty obvious that you would use a KWL chart, know, want to know, and learned after, and everybody uses the learned as an after. But I'm sure you've also seen that, here we go, you can add a fourth column, and it's what else. So obviously any reading, if you're an active reader, an active learner, any reading is going to lead to more questions. And so we ask some more questions, and that's a perfect opportunity to talk about, well, this little piece of text down here didn't give us the answers we wanted for those more questions, so how do we find out those answers? And we go back to our what do we want to know and answer our questions. If they haven't been answered during reading, we go back at the end and answer them. Talk about whether you had to infer to answer these questions. Did the information come right out of the text, or did we make inferences? And here's our questions we are answering. We also want to make sure that our predictions or our prior knowledge was correct, and maybe it conflicted with what we read, which may lead to some questions and some more investigating, or may lead to changing the knowledge that we thought we had. So KWL, again, is a very effective activity. That's an overview and a demonstration of before, during, and after. You're going to go into, there's some great videos you're going to look at, and then you're going to go into actually completing a series of activities for social studies and piece of text, and then some for science piece of text. So you'll have participated in them and submitted those in before you then do your own lesson plan. And that's the end of this one.